Since its release in 2018, the Hyundai Kona has been the sensible choice amongst families looking for a medium-sized SUV. But the Hyundai Kona has always had one small issue. It's lived in the shadows of its brother from another mother, the Kia Niro. Read any previous generation review of the Hyundai Kona and every journalist will say, yes, but it doesn't look quite good as the Kia. And Hyundai weren't having that. So for 2023, we have some brand new, far more stylish designs. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you everything that's changed, including the design, the space, and also the equipment. So if that does sound good, then please keep watching. And if you like new car reviews and car content, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Plus, if you are a Mark 1 Kona owner and you want to know exactly what has changed between the existing and the new Hyundai Kona, then I've put together another video for the John Banks review channel. So I'll pop that down in the description box down below. But first of all, let's start by talking about what's changed on the new generation from the outside. Whereas before, the electric Kona was based on the ICE platform, now they've built the ICE cars around the electric platform. That means that it's bigger and it also prioritises space and of course all your electric range. But for today, I haven't quite got my hands on the electric version. So we're looking at the hybrid and also going to be talking about the petrol as well. But externally, it looks very different to the outgoing model. The outgoing model was very simple, very plain, a lot of curves and edges, but on this car, it's much sharper, far more angular. I still think it's very recognisable as a Kona, but it's now got a bit of an edge about it. You've got that Z on the doors, which is similar to the Tucson, and actually this car looks a lot like the Tucson now. This is also the N-Line, so it is the slightly sportier model. The wheels are very much the same and you get a few different designs depending on which specification you're going for. You've also now got squared off wheel arches, whereas before they were much rounder and smoother. Onto the bonnet, you have a light bar which runs all the way along the front of the car. Now this light bar, like a lot of other brands, isn't going to be available on every version of the Kona, but it is on the N-Line and the higher spec advanced model. You also have the LED lights, which have now been brought down into this bottom part of the grille, and both the indicator and the lights are in this part rather than being on top of the bonnet like they were previously. The grille itself is very, very different to what it was. There is a lot more sharp angles, a lot more going on. The only place where the Kona hasn't increased in size is height. It's still the same height as it was previously, but it's now wider, longer, and it also has a longer track as well. So this gives you a ton more space on the interior, which we'll talk about in a moment when I jump inside. But let's talk about the back of the car. It's got a smoother, kind of unfussy design. I really like it. You also have a light bar which runs all the way across the back, and you have Kona spelled out across the tailgate. Now, whilst I do like this rear design, I think it's helped by the fact that this is the N-Line. So you've got that more aggressive bumper at the bottom, which looks really sporty, but it does have an element with this flat boot. But it does unfortunately give me hints of Bayonne, which is not necessarily a good thing. One really strange thing about this car is the exhausts. Now there are still two physical exhausts, even on the hybrid, but they almost look like they've been dented all the way around, which is a little bit odd. Now remember I mentioned about that additional space? Well, a lot of that space is inside the boot. The boot is now 30% bigger than it previously was, and it's got some fantastic design features which make living with the Kona super simple. Come here, I'll show you what they are. For a start, the opening of the boot is now lower to the ground, and this means lifting items in and out is easier than it was before. You still have a flush boot floor, but you do have the ability to drop the boot floor down a little bit lower, and that gives you some additional space even in this hybrid model. Now here's where things get really clever. You have your usual things like luggage hooks, and you've also got little tie down tethers as well, but you've also got somewhere to store your parcel shelf, which I think is really handy. Regularly, I take my parcel shelf out, perhaps when I'm going to the airport and I need to load up suitcases higher and there's nowhere to put it, and you end up putting it in the back seats or somewhere like that. But now you can actually take out the parcel shelf and then you can slide it behind and it re-slots into some little sections, so it remains in your boot, but it's out of the way. Plus, an electric boot is now optional on the higher spec models. As I mentioned at the beginning, I have literally just spent some time with the old Kona to compare these cars and see how much of a difference there actually is. And one of the most noticeable areas was in the back. Space in the back has really increased over the previous generation. There's a ton more headroom and loads more legroom as well. You could comfortably sit 2 6-foot people back here. 3 maybe a squeeze, but it's not at all non-possible because you've got a flat bench, so you can happily sit people side by side. When you're not using the middle seat, you've also got a pull-out armrest, which feels really sturdy, much sturdier than it did in the Honda ZR-V. And you also get 2 USB-C charging ports, which is really cool to have 2 ports in the back. You've also got an additional little bit of storage as well, and just before I forget, you've got reclining seats. So, if she can do it. There you go, that's popped into the upright position, and then you can actually also slide them backwards. And you can recline them a little bit as well, not very much, but it helps with added space in the boot if you need it, or you can have a bit more of a reclined position. Also, on this top spec N-Line S, you do also get heated rear seats. What a luxury. Before the release of the electric, the Kona can be had in 3 different engine variants. 2 are petrols and 1 is a hybrid, which is the one that I'm driving today. The cheapest of which is a 1 litre 118 brake horsepower petrol engine. You can also get a 1.6 litre petrol with nearly 200 brake horsepower, so quite a punchy engine. There's no confirmation just yet on the next Hyundai Kona N, but I will keep you guys updated because you can believe me that as soon as I can drive that car, I will be. The car that I'm driving is the hybrid, so this is a strong hybrid but not a plug-in. It gets a 1.6 litre petrol engine and then it also gets an electric motor. The petrol engine produces 105 brake horsepower and the electric motor 43, so overall it's, quick maths, just over 150 brake horsepower. I don't actually have confirmation if much has changed from the previous generation car, but I have actually driven the previous gen yesterday and it does feel like the new generation is just a bit more refined. I don't think anything's been changed in the way of battery capacity or engine size. I'm sure they've given it some few tweaks and changes to make sure it just runs a little bit smoother. And it does feel like this car runs quieter. The other car was a little bit noisy and this one seems to have a bit of a smoother power delivery and a bit of a smoother engine note as well. It starts almost always in electric as well, and you're going to be seeing around 60 miles per gallon from this strong hybrid. The new Kona will set you back a little more than the previous generation on account for the added space, equipment and the fact that it has more standard safety technology. The 1 litre starts at just under £26,000, all the way up to 34,225 for the top spec hybrid, which is still £5,000 less than the starting price of the Honda ZR-V that I've recently tested. The Kona has always had a relatively firm suspension to match with its well-weighted steering to help sharpen its handling and to help with driver engagement. And though I say a stiffer suspension setup, it's not as stiff as, for example, in the Performance N variant, because that car's almost borderline brutal, but it's not quite as soft as something like the Citroen EC4 or other versions of Stellantis group cars. But the good news about having a slightly stiffer suspension means that it's more engaging, it handles really well, and despite the fact that the Kona has increased in size and length, it doesn't feel any less agile than the previous generation. That's not to say that it necessarily has a sporty setup, because let's face it, it's an SUV through and through, and that means it's not kind of designed to be thrown into the corners. But if you was to pop it into sport mode and you wanted to have a little bit of spirited driving, it actually isn't too bad at achieving this. I'm undecided about the interior of the new generation Kona. There are things I like. I now like these great 2 sweeping screens that you also get in the higher specification and electric models. I also really like these seats. They're nice and comfortable, and on this top spec N-Line S you also get part leather and part Alcantara. They feel quite sporty. But then there's the things that I don't really like, which is this red plastic trim isn't really that nice, and also just the rest of the materials in the car. They're not quite as nice as in the new Honda ZR-V, but then that is a much more expensive car. Also, this new radio or climate control system, it does work really well, and it's fantastic to see a ton of buttons, really simple to use. But to me, it looks like a radio from the 90s. I'm not really sure what they were thinking about when it came to this design. It's almost dated it backwards a bit. Down below this is absolutely fine. You've got a new section for both your USB-C ports, so there's no USBs anymore. And I really like actually where you can press in here and then that opens up your 12 volt, but it's tucked away and you haven't got to worry about losing that little bit of plastic which hides behind the 12 volt. You do have to be aware that if you're using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it's not wireless. So it is wired, which is a shame, and it feels a little bit dated to the rest of the cars in its class. But when it's plugged in, you do actually have to press this button beside it and switch it from just charging to being your connectivity and charging, which caught me out quickly because I didn't realise that, and I've not seen that before. You've also got some buttons underneath this, which are your heated seats and your cooled seats. And I love the drive mode button. You've got a nice heavy weighted dial in the center console. That's really good. I also really love this center console. So you have got removable cup holders. So just like in the Kia products, you can tuck your cup holders away and then you've got loads and loads of storage. But if you want to pop your cup back, you can push it and then it opens up a cup holder section, which I like. You've got plenty of storage inside the armrest, and there's also through loading, and there's a little bit of hidden cubby storage underneath the armrest. Back to things I'm not too keen on, and that's this steering wheel. It feels like a weird blend between the old generation and also the electric products. The electric products are very simple and they just have 4 little squares which light up in some of the higher spec things. And I like that. I think that's a nice steering wheel. This just feels a bit weird. It's a bit confusing. They don't really know what they're wanting to do. Do you want to use the H or do you want to just go to squares? Don't do something in between for different models. But overall, everything is just super user friendly, which has always been key to the Kona. Everybody loved the fact that there was loads of buttons, it was really easy to use whilst driving, and that is exactly the same. You've still got tons of physical buttons. And the last thing to note is if you go for the automatic gearbox, it's no longer in the centre console, it's now behind the steering wheel, like with the electric products. It's actually been interesting reviewing the Hyundai Kona and the Honda ZR-V in such close succession, because they're very similar cars in many ways. They're a similar size, they have a similar amount of space and equipment, and they're also both hybrids if you go for this 1.6 hybrid version that I've been driving. However, this car is almost £10,000 cheaper than the ZR-V, and I do think you can tell from certain instances it does feel cheaper on the interior, and the engine is certainly not as refined as you get in the Honda. But I think when it comes to value for money, the Hyundai Kona still offers one of the best SUVs on the market. But what do you think of the new Hyundai Kona? Do you like the styling? Let me know in the comments down below. Have you got a Mark 1 and are you thinking of upgrading to the new Kona? Let me know in the comments. If you have enjoyed the video, please go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. Want to see more? Then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Plus, if you did want to come and see the Hyundai Kona for yourself, then you can come and test drive this one, or the 1 litre, or hopefully the electric in the future at Hyundai Cambridge. So I'll pop their details in the description box. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and until next time, see you later.